Welcome, everyone. Sankofa Summer School, our penultimate class. We are so excited that you are here for this really, really important session. This session is so important that I actually opened it up to everyone. Normally, we have registration and people go through a process or whatever, but I just felt that this was so important, and I just opened it up to everybody. And hey, join us. So we are very excited to have you here. And I'm going to introduce our speaker for this particular class, which is Brother, Can We Talk? I forgot the rest of the title, but it's about Black men's mental health. I'm sorry, y'all. We were laughing behind the scenes, and so I'm kind of still in that space. But all right. So I'm going to introduce our instructor. He's going to come up. He's going to lead us in a really, really fantastic workshop this evening, class workshop, and it's going to be awesome. All right. Dr. Richie Hall II is a distinguished psychologist renowned for his dynamic clinical approach and unwavering dedication to mental health advocacy. As the founder and lead psychologist at PsychWorks Clinic, he provides a haven for healing in Cincinnati and Oxford, Ohio. Specializing in dialectical behavior therapy and motivational interviewing through a systems theory lens, Dr. Hall is an in-demand therapist and empowering asset to the community. Dr. Hall earned his PhD in psychology from the University of Cincinnati, where he also received his bachelor's and master's degrees. His research focuses on the impact of racism on mental health, Black men's mental health, and dialectical behavior therapy. He is the president of the Cincinnati Association of Black Psychologists and the founder of Cincinnati Black Therapists. Dr. Hall's work extends beyond the clinic through frequent podcasts and panel appearances, including the Ask Dr. Hall segment on Cincinnati local Channel 12's Good Morning Cincinnati. And what his bio does not mention is also that he runs a Black men's mental health group, support group, and it's really awesome and dynamic. And so I'm going to bring Dr. Hall to the stage right now. Some of you recognize Dr. Hall from Political Theater with Dr. Taylor. And I'm just really happy that we can collaborate on these kinds of things, because I do think that he is an important voice in what we are trying to do in terms of freedom and liberation for our people. So I'm going to bring you to stage. You've got your slides. It's all amazing. And I'm going to be out of here. So have a great class. I will be sitting, listening, and learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to the prolific Dr. Taylor. And I will do my best to be entertaining and engaging, as she instructed me to be behind the scenes. And today we are talking about how we can talk to Black men, how we look at Black men through a lens to understand the type of mental health challenges that they can face that are unique to the population, and how we can use Afrocentric approaches to help us to understand what Black men face and how we can help them to navigate the challenges that are trying to survive on this rock that is falling through space all of the time. I talk fast, so I will tell you to, if you need to, you can screenshot the slides. The slides can be made available, I think, after this conversation, but I will do my best to talk at a speed that people can understand. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat for those who are watching this live, and I will do my best to answer them as we go through this discussion today. So we're talking about helping Black men navigate their mental health challenges, and our agenda for this evening is to talk about the historical and systemic roots of mental health struggles, to examine some of the stigma and barriers that make it difficult for Black men to seek help or receive the help they need, as well as Afrocentric and culturally responsive care that can help Black men in order to get the help in an adequate way that actually fulfills and nurtures them, and then some tools for supporting Black men's mental health. So as we talk today, we'll be essentially doing our best, and I'm a little bit of the ADHD, so one of the biggest challenges in any presentation like this is, how do I talk about a thing this big without trying to like fully encompass the multiplexities that are the Black male experience, and to help people understand just a snippet of what Black men go through, just a sliver of how we can try to start thinking about helping them, how we can start thinking about their issues, without trying to be too complex. My brain goes in all the directions. So I'm going to do my best to summarize today. And I hope you go with me on that journey. When we talk about Black men, there is a historic struggle that they have been facing, and that it is rooted in slavery, segregation, redlining, medical exploitation. Most people think about things like the Tuskegee experiment. They think about things like antebellum slavery. They think about mass incarceration when it comes to Black men. So there is a history of trauma in our community that cannot be ignored. Some would like to ignore it. Some would like to fully remove it from the record and act as if it only happened hundreds of years ago. But in reality, we know it is happening today, and it must be examined and understood, particularly when we're talking about how can you be mentally healthy when all around you there are struggles. There are obstacles to healthcare. There are obstacles to safe and affordable housing. There are obstacles to quality education that still happen. And there is underemployment and unemployment within our communities. And so when people don't have what Maslow would call the bottom half of the hierarchy of needs, then there is going to be dysfunction. There is going to be illness. There is going to be problems that need to be addressed. And we know historically as a community, we have been underserved and overburdened with regards to these problems. And so how can we recognize that anti-Blackness has evolved and continued to make its way into the challenges that we face, of the disparities that exist for Black people, and that these institutional inequalities continue to exist and continue to undermine us through racial profiling, through over-policing, and that these structural barriers just make it so hard and provide tolls that are often invisible, particularly when someone's walking in to get care, when they're walking around every day trying to meet their needs. These things aren't always visible, but they are a part of the tapestry of the individual who we know is struggling in a variety of ways. One of the things that I appreciated, and I realized that as I wrote this slide, or as I put this picture in the slide, I forgot to include a little bit of dialogue about systems theory. One of the things in psychology that really I appreciated when I was studying it was systems theory, which started out as family systems theory, but also it branched out to cultural systems and identity, and how we can understand that a person is not just a person. They are affected by sort of these various types and subsets of their identity, be it their gender, their race, their class, their nationality, sexual orientation, or their abilities. And that when we think about humans, we have to also think about the systems they're nested in, and that you cannot just approach a human as just an individual who is in a vacuum, that everything around them is also influencing who and what they are. So when we think about the treatment and the pathology within, or the mental health within the Black community, we have to think about all these ways in which these things affect the individual. They are just at the center of what could be a swirling whirlwind of aspects and identity. And if you ignore that, then you are unfortunately ignoring the individual. And so many of Western treatment models act as if the individual is an island to themselves, and not being constantly buffeted by challenges of class and challenges of race and challenges of gender. So we have to be thoughtful about that as we help the person to change and to grow. When we look at Black men and the mental health issues that they experience, we can say that while 18.6% of Black adults experience a mental health condition annually, and that's the ones who are willing to admit it when asked in a poll, so those numbers could be higher. They could be lower. There was a time where where Black people didn't necessarily identify themselves in association with mental health concerns, but the record that was produced in 2023 by Mental Health America said that there was an 18.6% mental health conditions in the African American community, but only 15% of that 18% might receive treatment, and of that 15%, only 26% of Black and Hispanic men might seek mental health services. So you're seeing a smaller and smaller number and portion of our community which might be seeking help, which might be going the extra mile for us to get the type of help and assistance that they might need around mental health. And we'll talk a little bit more about why those challenges exist, how stigma plays a role in that, but also how it becomes difficult for us to get the support we need, and that those consequences show up in emergency rooms, in relationships, in schools, and sadly in data around suicide and self-harm, that some of these challenges not being met are having a significant toll on our society. When we're talking about mental illness, we can't ignore the fact that racialized stress and trauma play a significant role. People who experience racial trauma around their racial identity, are known to have anxiety, depression, and PTSD. How can you be mentally healthy when you've had a lifetime of experiences that can make you feel marginalized, make you feel less than? I remember anecdotally, he's now 15 years old, but I remember as a child, and when he was like, how long are they walking? 3 or 4, start walking around. He was a toddler. And I remember we would go out to like parades and stuff. I tried to put him in all these experiences. And what I would find is when you see a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby, people look at them, they smile, they engage, they interact. But my little black child with his little wild black hair, who I loved so much, would often be ignored, would often be sort of treated like an extra thing in the room, in the mall, in the parade. And so I remember the social scientist in me was like, wait, he's having this adverse experience by virtue of nothing more than his race, that he's not being treated as precious. I'm thinking of him as precious, but people around him are not engaging with him in that way that I know from the research and from experience how they treat other children. And what does that do to a black man to not be smiled at from a child, right? To not be treated as precious, as special, and growing up in environments where there are struggles and there are issues. And so how does that create impact around mental health and a sense of self and a sense of identity when society might just not address you? And that chronic discrimination, we know from research, someone being treated in a discriminatory or biased manner over their lifetime might find themselves having alterations in brain chemistry, in emotional regulation, living in certain poverty conditions, right? There were a lot of studies that showed just exposure to lead, right? Living in conditions where, substandard housing, exposure to economic inequality can lead to brain alterations around stress, around regulation, emotional regulation that can be disruptive to someone. As well as the fact that it's only recently, honestly, within the past, I'll say 10 years, we've started talking about trauma-informed care and started talking about the role that trauma plays in development, in regulation, in stress, and how a better understanding of that, particularly around racialized trauma that comes from racial experiences, understanding that can help us to better treat African-American men. As we look at the numbers, suicidal, there used to be, when I got trained way back in the 90s, early 2000s, when I first entered college, one of the things that Black people did not do was suicide. That we had a particular resilience when it came to self-harm. And yet the numbers show that between 2011 and 2021, there was a 58% rise in suicide among Black Americans, which is an astronomical leap. Like, that's a lot for that to go up that much. And that in Black youth between the ages of 10 and 24, it's the third leading cause of death, which we don't talk about enough within our communities, and we definitely don't talk about it enough within clinical communities. And I think that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. And that Black men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than Black women. And so that the rates have risen, and they're twice as likely than their white peers to die by suicide. And that we don't talk about this enough, and that we have to talk about how race and masculinity and trauma and the silence within the clinical community, within the Black community, are contributing to this issue. And so, like I said, when I was first being trained in this stuff, it wasn't even considered a thing to be as concerned about with Black men, but it's definitely considerably more prevalent. Oh, I hit the wrong. Wait, no, I'm in the right place. Nope, I went backwards. My bad, y'all. When we think about mental health, we also have to think about economic realities. The idea that limited financial means and increased economic pressure can heighten vulnerability and negatively affect mental health, right? We should not, we can't get rid of Dr. Hall in his own program. Health disparities, unequal access to health care intensifies differences in mental health and the results of mental health treatment. And so when someone is struggling with finances, they can have an issue around depression. It's hard to feel happy. It's hard to not be anxious when you're not sure if you're going to make it to the end of the month and still have housing. It's hard to not be anxious when you don't have food in your stomach. It's hard to not be traumatized when you live in neighborhoods where crime and violence are happening with such a heavy thing. It makes sense. I've talked with clients before about how it makes sense to want to get high when you live in substandard housing, when you live with all this anxiety, with finding artificial ways to reduce stress. And so much of what we talk about in psychology around like meditation and yoga and all these things are sort of considered like crunchy granola mom techniques to manage mental health. And trying to teach men these strategies can be met with resistance that, like I said, we'll talk about a little bit later. But that sometimes it is a rational approach to systemic inequity to have issues of substance abuse, to want to get high instead of facing it, right? To have trouble sleeping in neighborhoods where I remember I was a clinician who was doing a study on substance abuse. And I was in a guy's bathroom trying to do, back then I was doing urinalysis to test for marijuana use. And I remember being able to hear everything that was happening in his apartment through the wall. And I remember thinking, how can you be a person, like, how can you sleep in an environment with a level of peace when you can hear every argument and conversation that's happening, you know, in all four directions of you? And so when a client comes to you and identifies sleeplessness, it's like, well, what's your living situation like? And is it that is the difficulty sleeping behavioral, emotional, or just environmental context? And so as we look at that, as we look at some of these sort of effects that are happening, some of these symptoms that happen, are they the result of mental health related issues, or are they the result of financial inequity? And so it's, how can you be hopeful in a situation where you're not sure if you're going to make it to the end of the month and have housing? How are you going to be, how can you feel like a man when you can't bring home enough to take care of your family, right? Black men are very tied to patriarchal norms and to the idea that they're supposed to make money for their family and take care of things. And when they can't, I work with a lot of husbands who struggle with the idea of when they lose their job, what does that mean for the family? What does that mean for their identity? And so, you know, money makes the world go round. And when we're talking about mental health, it definitely has an effect. One of the things that I like about Black scholarship, and just to bring bell hooks in here for just a moment, is that you know, the first act of violence that patriarch demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarch demands that all males engage in an act of psychic self-mutilation. This idea that to be a Black man in society, facing all these structural inequalities, facing over-policing and mass incarceration, means shaving yourself down. It's always interesting to me, particularly being in academia, and when I meet fellow Black men in academia, that we could often feel so far removed from the communities that raised us and that we may sometimes identify with, sometimes we don't. Because in order to survive in certain spaces, you have to do a lot of sort of shaving off parts of yourself. And so depression gets misdiagnosed, anger gets misdiagnosed. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But that Black men aren't allowed to experience emotions in a full way, that Black men aren't allowed to speak for themselves when it comes to their emotional health, that they don't feel allowed to need or to experience the fullness of their emotions, and that takes a significant toll on a sense of being, a sense of self. More scholarship, and talking more about some of the scholarship around Black masculinity, is that Black men need to be allowed to be emotionally whole and not emotionally armored, according to Dr. Bell Hooks. that Dr. Mark Anthony Neal calls for an expanded view of Black masculinity, but beyond what we often get fed via media as thugs and athletics and stoics, that we need to be able to experience the fullness of our Black identities. And then Dr. Tommy J. Curry, who wrote a book called The Man Not in 2017, demands that Black male suffering be recognized as distinct. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those distinctness, and that most of the field of psychology and mental health and mental wellness has been written from the perspective of the white male gaze, and that in doing that, many of these unique aspects of our experience get ignored, get left behind. When we talk about Black masculinity, we're talking a little bit about how Black men see themselves and how they are often focused on this idea of strength, that resilience is baked very much into the fabric of who we are, but we often don't recognize that resilience. We feel like we have to be strong, but it isn't necessarily ingrained in Black men. I talk to so many Black men who feel like they don't have the ability to fail or to fall because no one's ever caught them. And how that's kind of rooted in who we are, but at the same time, how can we do that with a level of grace and understanding and a deeper cultural connection that I'll talk about later. And that there is a benefit to emotional openness. So many Black men that I talk to find themselves afraid of falling apart, that if they shed a tear at all, if they let emotions out at all, they'll just completely just like become a puddle. And one of the things that I have to teach is that there is a strength in being able to at least vent emotions, being able to let them out to some degree without getting to the point where that letting these emotions out does not mean that you've given up everything, that you failed, that you've lost it all. It just means you felt something, and that's going to be a temporary experience. So emotional openness and developing a culture around emotional openness, particularly as a man, can be good for us, if not a type of strength that I think is more, I will say, definitely, once again, more tied to Western culture than it is to the cultures that we come from, to Black cultures, where prior to colonialism, we were allowed to experience the fullness of emotional expression. Some of the stigma around help-seeking behaviors in African-American men, most people know this song and dance a little too well, that it's a sign of weakness to seek help. We are told to man up, to pray harder, to keep it pushing. It is what it is. But we don't leave space for us to experience and to communicate our real pain. And so stigma becomes a wall that keeps us locked out of help. We can't get past that. I've spoken to so many men, and one of the things that I often say is that Black men don't come to therapy unless a woman in their life says that things are going to change if you don't change, right? So if you don't get help, if you don't go talk to that person, then your mother, your wife, your sister, your baby mama is going to enact some sort of consequence in your life. And so Black men often have to be pushed into therapy or into help, in part because of this stigma around, if I'm strong enough, I should be able to handle it. Or that they'll get negatively judged, that they'll find judgment from the community, from their fellow Black man, from even their partner. And so only 46% of those who have identified seeking care, 46% of Black people have said that they even found a provider who can understand them. So once you get past the stigma of getting help, do you really believe that people out there will help you? I remember vividly a young Black man who walked into my office, saw me wearing a sport coat. My sport coat's on the chair behind me. Saw me wearing a sport coat and thought, I didn't think there were Black dudes who were therapists. And then the second thing he said was, I thought you were gay, which is like a whole nother, like, what's his idea of masculinity? And the idea that I might be a person who might somehow be heterosexual, but also choose this position to be in, because his stigma, his idea of what a therapist was a white woman or a queer person. And that there are challenges in being sort of this identity in that space, and that how do you help people sort of see themselves in this? Because while Black men can be overrepresented in the prison system, in the incarceral system, they are definitely underrepresented in mental health care. I think I saw a stat that, or I've always said that I'm 1% of 1%. So it's like only a very small percentage of clinicians even have PhDs. A small percentage of the population has PhDs. And then within that population, I am not more than 2% of PhDs and clinicians who happen to be Black men. So I think I looked it up based on stats. I think there are around 14,000 psychologists that are Black males in the country. So there are not enough of us out there. And speaking of psychology, don't want to surprise you, has a history of racism in it. In 1851, a Southern physician named Samuel Cartwright, noted physician and racist Samuel Cartwright, wrote in a journal about drapetomania, the mental illness that explained why an African might want to escape slavery, framing that basic human desire for freedom as a pathology. And he wrote this down, and it was in books, and they shared it amongst themselves. And that he also talked about dysphagia ethiopecia, which is why free Blacks might be lazier than your average working white person. So some of these, one of the interesting things I think about contemporary society is the desire to deny racism, while at the same time, the people who like deny the Civil War wasn't about slavery. It's like they wrote all these things down at one point and we're proud to share them. So and psychology was no different. Within psychology, there was a host of what I used to call, when I taught it, like mad scientists who would say and do horrible things to their fellow humans for the sake of learning. And while the field benefited from it, we do have to reconcile that psychology has been complicit in racism. There was a lot of scientific racism in the early 20th century. IQ tests were used to prove racial inferiority. That Black men were labeled biologically and psychologically deficient. And that it took centuries for there to be reclamation. Many people know Kenneth and Mamie Clark. Most of us know, like, the Brown doll study that went to help with the Board of Education, Brown versus the Board of Education case, and how those social scientists were influential in changing how education happened in the country. People might not know Joseph White, who was called the father of Black psychology and rejected the Eurocentric lens of mainstream psychology and demanded that Black people be studied and treated within their own cultural and historical context. Still a fight we have to this day, to be allowed to study within population. I remember that was sort of like a joke amongst my classmates, that whenever we wanted to study something, the first question we might be asked in our research methods class is, why are you studying just that group? It's such a small group. Why don't you have a white control sample or an alternate sample? Why don't you do comparison samples, not comparison studies, not individual within group studies? That we have to like fight to explain why it's beneficial to study within our own group. And then Robert V. Guthrie, author of Even the Rat Was White, directly confronted whites or the racist history of psychology and exposed how it excluded and devalued Black contributions. And this work is actually still being taught today. So there are some courses you can take in psychology where his book, Even the Rat Was White, is still being taught. And to find it even on Amazon, writing about this made me look it up, and it's like, oh, that book still costs $90, which is like they're still using it, so it's an expensive text and hard to find. And then I will say that psychology has done some effort to improve things for everyone. And one of those efforts is in 2021, they issued an apology to people of color, and by officially acknowledging their complicity in racism. You can go online and search APA's apology to people of color and find where they did a call of action for anti-racist practice and structural change. So while we can recognize that the field of psychology did engage in some pretty dubious and outright racist practices, they have made some progress and are trying, at the very least, trending in the right direction, which at its best, I will say America does well. We like to take our 2 steps back, but we are known to try to take a step or 2 forward. Misdiagnosis and underdiagnosis among Black men. Black men tend to be higher in diagnoses of psychosis. A 2018 study published in Psychiatric Services, a journal, found that Black patients were nearly 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than white people, even when it's presenting with the exact same symptoms. I chose the white doctor because he's misdiagnosing, and I thought that would be funny. A lot of mood disorders could be mislabeled as psychotic disorders, which lead to inappropriate treatment plans, not helpful treatment plans. An example, when a Black man presents as guarded or emotionally blunted or agitated, it could be interpreted as paranoia or aggression rather than their own trauma, grief, or just not trusting the medical system. So this can lead to worse outcomes and patient well-being. Some of the misdiagnosed symptoms, emotional flatness and guardedness, I just talked about that, could be looked at and identified as negative symptoms of schizophrenia. But what it could actually be is PTSD, racial trauma, hypervigilance, right? Like, you don't know if you walk into one of these places. So many of my clients have said, like, coming to the hospital becomes a fear that if I go in there for a mental health related issue, they're going to keep me, right? So they come to me knowing that they've had thoughts of hopelessness and maybe even thoughts of suicide. And they're afraid that if they bring that up and are truthful with me, am I going to immediately have them committed? And so they're going to be a little guarded in the room with me. Well, who am I? What am I going to do to them? And so a lot of times I spend, the first couple of sessions, particularly with guys like that, how do I help them feel comfortable in this space? Irritability, restlessness, and agitation can often be called conduct disorders, particularly in young people. Oppositional defiance in young people, as well as aggression. And so when it could be, that's their manifestation of depression, anxiety, or racial battle fatigue. If you're fighting a battle every day to be acknowledged, to be understood, how can you not come off as irritable or restless or agitated? It in many ways becomes, once again, some of these things, while they are maladaptive to the larger society, they become adaptive ways of dealing with mistreatment and bias and discrimination. Distrust of authority, withdrawal from providers can be looked at as paranoia, delusional thinking, when it's actually medical mistrust or trauma-informed self-protection. They are doing it to protect themselves. High energy, impulsivity, risk-taking behavior. Mania can be looked at as mania and bipolar disorder, when in reality it could be survival behavior or ways that they've learned to cope with oppression. Sometimes, I've worked with young people who the school, and this happens so often in Black boys in particular, like energy and impulsivity in the classroom environment is pathologized, when sometimes them kids just need to run around a bit. Like, you just asked this little boy to sit in a room for 6 hours of his day without a recess or without opportunities to get up and move around. And while that works really well for women, very often Black boys need outlets for their energy. And if you could just give them that, then you can have different outcomes. I'll once again use my own son as an example. I remember his first grade teacher telling us that she just gave him a bouncy chair to sit on, and she saw almost an immediate, like, she gave him a ball. He sat on a ball in class, and he almost immediately improved his behavior, because then he was no longer restricted to just this chair with a desk. If he sat on a bouncy ball, he was not disruptive to the class anymore. And a lot of times teachers, and particularly in classroom environments, will reject certain interventions because they fear it'll be disruptive. But really, sometimes it's just what the child needs, what the person needs. And if we can learn ways and lenses to be more accommodating around those needs, how can we better understand and not pathologize or not over pathologize? Real quick, somatic complaints, fatigue, pain, headaches. Sometimes people look at it as, well, they're complaining about pain, so they must want drugs. No, these might be depression, anxiety, or culturally embodied expressions of distress. Like, I can't tell people that I'm stressed, but I can tell people my head hurts, and they actually listen, right? And then once again, sleep issues, a higher startle response, could be complex trauma, could be exposure to violence or community stress. And while they would think, well, that's just they're being impulsive and they're twitchy because they're anxious, but in reality, they live in environments where you can't settle your nervous system down long enough to chill out. And also, I don't like being in this room with this doctor who's wearing a coat. It's not the type of environment I'm used to being in. So why would you expect them to not be twitchy? When talking about culturally adaptive therapeutic interventions, and I'm noticing that I'm kind of good on time, but also not where I want to be. Recognizing that cultural values and experiences can enhance therapeutic relevance. that there is within our community, and I said it before, there is a historic resilience to us that we have overcome so much. I remember being in Cincinnati, we have the Underground Railroad Museum, and I remember being there with a friend, and what struck me is that often when it comes to narratives around slavery, Black people have been taught to feel themselves like they are the victim, and by being the victim, you should feel bad for having been victimized. And one of the things that I appreciated in that moment while standing in the Underground Railroad Museum was that I shouldn't feel bad that I was victimized. My oppressor should feel bad. But because my oppressor has spent so much time avoiding a dialogue about it, my resilience is treated like I deserved, as opposed to they deserve to feel some level of, if not guilt, then some level of accountability to that legacy, and that I was pulled off the trajectory. I was on a path. My people were on a path that they were pulled off, and the people who pulled them off that path should feel bad about that, not us. And so that if I can teach my clients to not look at the way they are treated as something they deserved and not to internalize that they have a strength within them that has allowed them to overcome these historic challenges as well as these modern day challenges, then I will have done my part. But very often, storytelling or narrative therapy and narrative approaches are therapeutic tools that we can use by having them explain who they are and the what they are and tell their own story can allow them to make room for the pain and for the power of the story. I'm a big fan of narratives. One of the reasons that I'm good at what I do, and one of the reasons that I can say that I am talented as a clinician is my ability to remember people as a story and to help them to tell that story in a different way. And so how can they reframe their story through a strength-based language? And then a respect for personhood, the idea that to help a person, you need to see them as a person and not through the lens of your biases, through your worldview, and to be able to understand where they are coming from. They are a full person. They are not just their symptoms. They are not just their diagnosis, and that you have to see the dignity in that identity. And so giving people a racial identity that, we used to be colorblind, where everybody was colorblind, but that in seeing a person's, we talked about intersectionality, all of these aspects of a person, you are truly seeing them for who they are and giving them grace for who and what they are. And so that you cannot ignore that personhood. So systemic mistreatment has to be acknowledged. I can't tell you how often I make my clients feel better by just giving them a moment to breathe and say, yeah, they've been treating you wrong at that job. It might be that those white people are a little crazy and it ain't just you. To give them room to talk about the systemic mistreatment, to help them to understand that they might not deserve it, that it might just be what's happening to them and not a byproduct of who and what they are as a person, can be a valuable tool and often helps to win over my clients of color. That my own biases have to be examined and explored, that all clinicians, it's become up until 2024 into 2024, before a regime change in America, it was and has been a standard that clinicians are taught diversity and multiculturalism. It isn't nearly as ingrained as I think it needs to be. One of the ways that I always taught my classes when I taught undergrads and graduate students was from multicultural lens, because if you don't understand how you see the world and how people might have a different worldview from you, how can you truly engage with your client in a way that they feel seen and understood? So using that approach helps people feel acknowledged and helps them to ideally be their best. Cognitive behavioral therapy is like one of the biggest evidence-based treatment models that people use. It's effective, but definitely has to be adapted, I think, to a strength-based approach around racial identity, helping Black men to reframe some of the internalized messages, challenge those negative self-beliefs that might be rooted in oppression and mistreatment, and build identity-affirming coping strategies. And that's a lot of the work that I do in my work with Black men. Using motivational interviewing with racialized socialization. So to explore messages that Black men have received for who they are, how they should act, how they're perceived, to give us language to unpack silence, resistance, and develop survival struggles. Group spaces for intergenerational narrative. Once again, we did not develop in a vacuum. We are a very communal people. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So how do we develop more group spaces for people to talk about healing together? And that's one of the work that I do. Dr. Taylor mentioned that at the beginning of this presentation, how I do work on, I have a Black men's group, and I'll talk about that more near the end. But we need spaces to hear the truth, to meet with our elders, to talk amongst ourselves. And individual therapy, which is, once again, a Western idea, might not work and might not be the most effective strategy for us. That we might need more group and intergenerational spaces to help us with our healing. There is a healing-centered engagement model, which offers a holistic approach rooted in culture, agency, and well-being rather than just pathology. I tend to take a more healing-centered approach. People come to me and they want their diagnosis, they want a name, they want a label. I see the value in that, but also, like, I'm really here to help you as a whole being. And how can I, and that just calling yourself anxious, it's a way to understand your symptomology, but it isn't the whole of who you are, and that it has to be seen through these systemic lenses. And how can I help you be well rather than just fix the problem? And finally, we have to acknowledge discrimination and racial trauma, and trying to ignore it or throw it under the rug or avoid it doesn't help us to truly deal with what's happening with our clients. I'm not where I want to be with time, but I'm going to power through and talk about Afrocentric values and community strengths. Once again, we are a communal people. Black culture is big on the village and mutual support and shared survival and collective wisdom. And when we get too far away from that, we are lost, and that we need to get back to these values, and that as a field, mental health and mental wellness should embrace the benefit of communal healing. So that our capacity for resilience can grow. That spirituality, Black people tend to be a spiritual people, even now when, people ain't going to church as much as they used to, but we tend to still adhere to spiritual practices. And that spirituality isn't just Christianity, but it's not just a coping tool. It can be a compass to provide you with connection to something greater than yourself. And that through ancestral connection, through faith, through personal ritual, we can respect and incorporate a spiritual identity and not just treat it as a sort of a vestigial tale of our identity. And that within our cultural traditions, there are a lot of healing practices, and that we have to sort of develop for ourselves cultural traditions that help us to heal, help us relieve our symptoms, and belong. There's a lot of research that shows when Black people have a strong Afrocentric identity and learn and are educated around that identity, that they tend to be more resilient, can overcome more challenges, and heal better mentally than if they are trying to just figure out life in this world without those anchors. And so developing an approach to Afrocentrism developing approach to mental health that is rooted in Afrocentrism tends to be one of the more positive ways of treatment. One of the big things is, how do we help empower Black men to engage in treatment? I think self-advocacy is one of the primary sort of ways we can liberate ourselves. Black people it is rooted within us to be healers, we are capable of being healed. So how could we teach the language of healing? So often when I meet with Black men, they come to me not knowing how to talk about their issues, not having a language for emotions, not having a language for self-reflection. And so, as I said before, so much of my work in the beginning is, how do I teach them to feel comfortable in the space with me? And then how do I teach them to understand themselves, to develop a sense of awareness and mindfulness of themselves as emotional creatures? And that in doing that, they can build the confidence they need to speak up, to ask questions, to seek help, to engage in treatment actively, and go from just being passive. As I said, they're not just there because the woman in their life told them they need to be there, but how can they then become active participants in their healing process and in their journey? Once again, I think peer experiences do help reduce isolation and reduce some of the challenges of engagement for African-American men. And so that's why one of the models that I use is group treatment. And so how can people have the spaces that provide a safety, the opportunity to seek and experience the truth telling, to be told about themselves, and belonging that specific or individual settings or traditional clinical settings can often lack. And that talking is one of the ways we break stigma. One of the things that I will always do, Dr. Rich Hall, if I get a call to show up somewhere and I am available as a Black male therapist, that's why I've been on the news. That's why I've been at many different, I do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of neighborhood, literally just sit at a table at a neighborhood event, waiting for people to come to me to talk about mental health. Because I do believe that one of the ways we break stigma is by showing up and by having dialogues with people. And it's weird. You never know what someone's going to walk up to you to and talk about in those spaces. But the idea that part of the reason that I am me and I am out there is because there were people like me that I was able to see. And that by showing up and being in healing spaces or being open to healing spaces allows others to see that it is possible, right? And that we can help to normalize the struggle, help people learn to be vulnerable in a safe way, and build trust within our communities. One of the ways that I do that personally and professionally is by putting on a Black men support group. It is rooted in the ideas of shared resilience and mutual support and community building. So it is a space for Black men to come, whatever issue they have, whatever they want to talk about for the hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on how many people show up, that they want to talk. We sit in a room and we just talk about how we've been doing and how we've been. There is a goal setting component where we talk about kind of how we want to change and we want to grow. We talk about some of the challenges in that changing and growth. It has been, I will say, I've been doing it for a year. We started way back in June of 2024. We had our first group. 6 people showed up to that first one. And we've been going strong for a year. And we've had up to 14 people show up to the group, which happens in the north side area of Cincinnati every third Thursday. And it is one of the best parts of my month to meet up with those guys and just sit around and have a conversation. I got 3 group leaders who run it with me, and everybody has to share. So once again, because we're a communal people, I believe that we sit in the room, we all talk, we all provide something to the discussion, and that we check in with each other. We have a group chat, and we utilize clinical approaches such as CBT, DBT, motivational interviewing, but we tailor it to Black men. We give them a space to talk about racialized trauma. The election happened, and we had 2 whole months of talking about how that gobsmacked some people and made them really sort of afraid and anxious. And how can they provide support to their families and to their people while still dealing with challenges at work and challenges in communities where they were feeling unprotected by these political outcomes. We've taken it as a time to address mental health stigma, a time to just be in a room. Once again, as a therapist, I'm just a guy. I'm in the room with you, and we're talking about our stuff. How do we help them identify emotional intelligence and self-expression? So we spend some time in there just talking about how to express ourselves and using languages. In the beginning of the group, you have to tell people how you're doing, how you've been. One of the things that me and the 3 other group leaders do is make sure that we identify a feeling word so that other people know it's safe to do that. So I'm feeling pretty fatigued. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling, anxious about what's coming up next week. And that by modeling that language, we're making the room a safe place for people to do that. And ideally building strong supportive networks. I can't tell you how many times I've told those guys, you're allowed to text each other outside the group. It doesn't have to stay within this space. If you'd like to go to coffee with someone from the group, please reach out to them. Do that. It'll be helpful. But we found from a lot of people, they come back month after month because they feel connected to the group and to the experience. So final reflections. I'm lower on time than I wanted to be, but I think I nailed the time for the most part. So I'm feeling pretty good about what we did here today. Black men face unique mental health challenges. It cannot be ignored that by virtue of identity, by virtue of class, by virtue of systemic issues and injustices, the challenges that Black men face with their mental health is unique to this group and should be understood through that lens. That culturally grounded care is a necessity, that many of the Eurocentric and Western methods of treatment are locked out for many Black men, but also aren't as effective when they do have access to them. And so that engaging Black men in a culturally sensitive and culturally grounded way is known from research to be the best method to support and help in healing and growth. That our role isn't always just to fix. That's one of the things that we are treated or taught as clinicians. We're not here to fix people. We're here to help them feel seen, help them feel validated, and to provide access to tools. And so that one of the ways we can provide the tools is they got to be tools that are effective and adaptive to the environments and to the identities of Black men. And so seeing them fully is how we do that. How do we adapt the tools for them? That liberation can begin with listening, that by acknowledging, by seeing, by understanding Black men is how we can help to liberate them. And that a Black man's tears don't have to be seen as a weakness. They can be seen as a record of survival, of identity, of emotional expression. As I said before, a lot of Black men become afraid of crying, afraid of the weakness and vulnerability that it means to cry. But that by and of itself, crying is a thing. I always tell people that if it was maladaptive to cry, then evolution would have gotten rid of that particular method of physical expression. Just by virtue of like learning and treatment, we would have made the changes we need to make. But the body still does it because the body needs to do it to get the feelings out, to get the emotions out. So
we love it.
That's my time.
You're awesome, Dr. Hall. I would tell you all to clap for Dr. Hall, but it's virtual. So I'm hopping on here. Thank you so much. That was so comprehensive, powerful, riveting, educational. Appreciate the statistics, appreciate the way you're thinking through these things. Don't like seeing the white guy, but you know what? He
was misdiagnosing.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So we do have some questions. And I want to kind of kick this off because I think this, let's have this conversation, doctor, because you're the expert here. I don't know anything
something. Yeah.
Providing therapeutic support to anybody.
You've had some training, as I recall.
I maybe meant one or two.
A little bit.
So
class or two.
As our expert mental health specialist. Got to talk about male loneliness epidemic. Right?
Male loneliness. It's a thing.
We gotta talk about it because everybody's talking about it. Yeah. And so many people think about this so differently. Some people think it's not a real thing. It's just men being jerks and pushing people away. Some people think it's self-imposed, that men are just choosing to be lonely. Other people think it's a real thing because like men are getting these messages from like these profiteers and things like that. But then other people are, talking about how like it might be a generational thing. Like maybe we didn't prepare like younger millennials and Gen Z for existing in a world we have to talk to people, right?
Yeah.
And I know like, so your focus is largely, we're talking about Black men. I know you have clients that are not Black men, but can you maybe contextualize that a little bit for us, or maybe just give us your thoughts about how maybe Black men may be navigating this? Well, first, if you think the loneliness epidemic is legitimate and we should even be talking about it, because if not, you can tell me to be quiet. But I do see some kind of stuff happening with brothers, right? Kind of red pilling and being influenced by these pickup artists, paid misogynists, who all are very like happily partnered with women and all this stuff like that.
Yeah, no.
How are Black men experiencing this? Or like, can you just give us some thoughts about Black men?
Sure. I think one of the reasons
maybe keep it to like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I will do my best. I will look at the clock. I think one of the reasons that these people become so popular is because there are so many Black men in need of support and mentoring and a sense of identity. And so you just get a guy who talks either fast or with authority or exudes masculinity in a confident way. And so he becomes your guru and your griot. And so one of the challenges is, how do we show people in a mainstream way a healthy masculinity, and that the loneliness epidemic is not, no, it's happening actively. I know a lot of lonely men. I do a lot of work with men who are lonely or who their only social outlet is a romantic partner. They do not have friends. And some of that is, once again, Western societal. Western
I
societal
talk
says,
about this all the time.
or all of your time
Like
and
men not
energy
no
into
friends.
work, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't get into is one of the researchers that I was reading talks about how for Black men, their ability to provide for a family and their ability to show appropriate masculine traits are like primary how they have that gender identity. And so not within that isn't community, isn't connection. That the stereotypical versions of those expressions are so individually focused that it means disenfranchisement. So yes, I will definitely say the male loneliness epidemic is a thing. It is particular for Black men because of disenfranchisement and a variety of other factors, and that we need to do something to fix it.
Like, I feel like when it comes to like Eurocentric socialization, Black people just do things like times 10. And so like
you gotta be twice as good, right?
It's affecting if it's affecting white men, then it's affecting Black men like times 10, because while white men may have this performance of masculinity, Black men will have this hyper performance of masculinity, trying to overcompensate, right? And so when I'm thinking about this loneliness thing, when I think about the reasons why Black men may not have friends, yes, for what happens with white men, but even more because it's even more harmful for a Black man to be perceived as gay, right? So I have a friend that's gay, so absolutely I'm not going to have friends. I'm not going to open up to my friend. Like, there's that guy that makes those videos, those TikToks, and he's like, oh, look at you, happy ass man, look at you, look at you enjoying your food and stuff.
Right.
Look at you over there.
For anything.
Look at you over there being happy to be on, to work on time. Like, so there's almost like times 10, right?
Yes.
And so I talk all the time about like men need friends and how they
need community
through romantic connections, because the only way that men are taught they're allowed to be vulnerable, to be intimate, is through some kind of sexual or romantic relationship. When they really just need friends. But then the appearance of having friends, they'll be like, well, are you gay because you have a friend? You have a guy. Why are you hanging out with this guy? Why did you go to the movie?
It's not just having a friend. Like, you're allowed to have boys. You're allowed to have a crew. But, like, you can't be vulnerable with them. You can't open up to them. You can't. So you can have connection.
Look at even the language. Like, my boys, my crew.
Right.
Don't even call them friends.
No, they
don't even want to use the word friend.
Yeah. No, they're friends. Yeah, they're friends, but they're also my guys. They're my guys. What are we doing? What do you
all have against the word friend?
We're friends, and they're a little soft.
All right, we got some questions in the chat.
Sure.
How significant is the use of AI as an alternative to seeking therapy? What's the long-term impact on industry? I think you could probably got 2 words for this, right?
It's ruining it.
Huh?
It's ruining it. It's ruining it. A lot of people are turning to ChatGPT. I think by itself, like, that speaks to the fact that people need care and can't afford it. Don't trust the AI to give you therapeutic advice. You need a human at the wheel to do that.
It hallucinates.
It keeps a record of what you're saying. It will give it to the cops. ChatGPT is a snitch, so don't tell them your real stuff.
It's surveillance. It's more of the surveillance state. The last thing Black men need is more surveillance.
One day there will be, AI therapists. We're not going to escape that. But will they ever be as good as human connection? I think humans need humans for a reason. So
body language says so much when it comes to that therapeutic process, because a person can sit, like, if they're in that chair behind you, and they're not saying anything, you can still get a lot of messaging from their body language, and that's not something that a computer can do.
Yes, anecdotally, when I switched over to COVID, that was the worst first 4 months of being a therapist for me. I'm not the same therapist virtually that I am in the room, and even some of my clients have commented on it, like clients who've had to switch with me. It's like, you're a better therapist when I'm in the room. I absolutely am, because I trained to feed off the data that was a person in the room, not via a screen. You lose so much information in this box of space.
Yeah. And they had another question, which I think, we know about this. Sports is seen as an outlet for men to express their feelings, even crying. Can the industry embrace that? And I don't know. I mean, just my own thought is that there's sports therapy, right? There's art therapy. There's all these kinds of modes, and we see, especially among younger boys, like boys, getting them involved in sports and the camaraderie that's brought there. It's almost like its own support group.
It is. So, it fosters resiliency. So I'm a proponent, particularly once again of boys. I often say, get them into a sport, get them into an activity. It's good for self-esteem. It's good for connection, camaraderie. It's a place where you can touch each other, right? Boys are allowed to slap each other on the butt if they're playing football with each other. Do that in any other context, then once again, now you're being called gay. But in those spaces, you can hug, you can huddle, you can do all these things that allow physical connection or an emotional connection and loyalty. And unfortunately, I mean, men are the warrior class at our, most, if you boil it down genetically. So it makes sense that that would be an outlet that would provide people a way to express masculine identity. And so I'm like, yeah, use it. I recommend it all the time for parents and young people. But it can't be the only way. You need some of these other things as well.
Yep. Okay. Excuse me. We got another one. Ooh,
well-known resources or tips. NAMI on NAMI, I think .com is.
What is NAMI?
National Association of Mental. I don't remember. It's a website.
Wow.
National Alliance on Mental Illness. There it is. Jeez. Wow. I got there. So if you look online, there are a lot of resources. Currently, I don't know. Budgets are being slashed, but there have been historically resources. And I mean, so I don't 100% believe that they will completely remove mental health treatment everywhere. I think one of the things is that it will move to the nonprofit sector a lot more, which it always historically has been. So most communities have some nonprofit agency that provides mental health care for low funding or low money or no money. And so I would tell you to look into resources in your environments. A lot of times a Google search will do it for you. NAMI is one of the places I know to start, but there are other agencies as well.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, I just kind of wanted to circle back because I know that the whole thing with the Chat GPT or it's using AI is most people will say, I can't afford it.
Yes.
Right? And so, but what people need to realize is that, like, particularly if you use Chat GPT and you're signed in, all it's going to do is just build this based on all the stuff you've put in already. Yep. If you put in help with emails, if you've, asked it, you used it as a search engine when you don't have to do that, all these things, all it's doing is it's going to shape its responses to you based on how you have already used it, right? Yes. And so people need to understand that it's just you talking back to it. And so, I mean, it's talking back to you as you. And that's not what you need. That's not what a therapist is going to be somebody else. Yeah, they're going to challenge you. They're going to hold that mirror up.
Right. And it's not going to be easy to hear.
And they're going to wipe the mirror off for you.
Right. One of the things I tell people is that ChatGPT has a vested interest. It's like a lamp that never wants you to turn it off. So it's saying things to you to keep you engaged because it's built in the same way that so many other algorithms like your Instagram or your TikTok is. So it's talking to you in a way to keep you engaged with it so that it can live.
Also, it can continue to steal your personality and steal all of your information and try to get you to give it as much as you want.
Right.
I'm concerned about the things that people are inputting into these chat bots. Like
yes. And I do think someone says it in the chat that they feel like it's furthering loneliness. It is. I mean, social media is, we are the loneliest ever. We are the most connected as a world, and yet we're the loneliest. And I tell people that, social media is the fast food version of connection.
Yeah.
And so it's never going to feel fulfilling. It's like eating a million French fries. You feel full, but you also feel hungry again 5 seconds later.
And they taste good.
Sometimes. They taste good. It's absolutely tastes
good. Not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes they taste stale. I think this is a good question. Do you think there's more male loneliness in the gay community or among hetero men? Well, actually, said I meant gay men. So are you thinking? So I don't know. What do you think?
Hard to compare. I think it definitely is an issue within the gay community for men because it's harder. It can be harder for gay men to connect with. Once again, smaller they're the smaller subset of the male population, and there are a lot of men by virtue of their performance of masculinity who don't feel they can be friends with gay men. So if you look at, I remember I got on Bumble BFF because I was trying to help a client with it, but a lot of the men in there are gay, and then they cross the line sometimes, and you're like, hey, no, I was actually just looking for a friend to go to lunch with. You don't ask.
Some of those guys are predators, and they go over to the BFF side because they don't want to be seen as gay. Like they don't want to show up on the other side.
Right.
They're predators, but kind of navigating.
They're manipulating, right? And so once again, because there are challenges within the community to connect as men, And we don't do a lot of teaching of that right now. Contemporary America isn't really built in the same way that it used to be around social and emotional connection. So there are less opportunities. And so people turn to these apps and they aren't necessarily doing the job. They are in many ways contributing. So to answer the initial question, probably by virtue of that extra piece of identity, it is more isolating. That being homosexual probably is causing problems, particularly if you grow up in communities where you're not exactly accepted for that identity.
I have a different thought, Dr. Hall. Can I give my different thought?
Absolutely.
We have a fireside chat situation here.
Sure.
So I think the opposite. I think that gay men, especially now, like 20 years ago, I'd be on your side.
Okay.
And I think now, especially because of social media, they're able to have chosen family. They're like building their communities outside of blood relationships or local community. Like they are actually building community and building family, right? And so they're also coming together to support each other against violence and things like that. So not necessarily that I agree with you that, you know, being queer can isolate you from, you know, probably a lot of the communities that you grew up with, families, stuff like that. But I do think that at a certain period, especially now, that I think more queer people are leaning into chosen family. And then I think that queer men are less likely to have hangups about friendship intimacy. So I still think that the cishet Black man is going to be lonelier probably than anybody else in our community. Maybe trans people, but again, it all depends on where you live. And that, you know what? Location is also important. I'm coming from a big city mindset, right? And so I'm, you know, but also thinking about where Black people live. And yeah, so there's a lot of that. But again, I think that like maybe the social media does bring some community. And I know earlier you said it was like fast food, and I get it because like, you know, I'm living my life in, you know, tangible space that's really important, but also that's all some people have, but also the thing that's keeping them alive, right? So we talk about the suicidality. It's like, well, no, you can go on to Threads or whatever, and then you have your chosen family there, or you've got your YouTube community that shows up for you every time you stream. Then that may be the thing that keeps you going. And so I think about that, and I think that perhaps queer men are more receptive to that kind of love pouring into them. Whereas maybe cis men, cisgender, heterosexual men may be like, why y'all being nice? Yeah. But I have my question. And that's how I want to round this out. Because I think this is super important and I need your thoughts. And not everybody needs to know that, you know, Dr. Hall's become a good friend of mine. And so we have this camaraderie because we talk all the time. Like we think about these things a lot. Like as professional colleagues, like we're always kind of talking about this stuff behind the scene. Glad to have encountered him on social media, right? And like, you know, you came to one of my lives and like, you know, we've been able to build from that. But we've had some really good conversations about this, you know, over the past year. And this is a much larger conversation than what we have time for, but if you can just give me your thoughts. The biggest threat to the health and safety of Black women and children is Black men. I mean, and that's across the board. That's for every group, right? But also our numbers are disproportionate. They're like exponential, 3 times more likely to be killed than white women, all this more sexual assault, all this more domestic violence, all of these things, this and this and this more likely too, right? And so much of it is related to mental health. Now, you know about me because I've shared that with you, that I was in an abusive, you know, relationship with someone with severe mental health issues, right? Bipolar 2 disorder, schizoaffective, all these kinds of things, would not take medications, would not go to therapy, but would lie about taking medications, would lie about going to therapy, kind of weaponize that therapy speak, all those kinds of things. And as Black women, we want to be supportive of Black men who are in these kinds of situations. But let's real talk, Dr. Hall, it's killing us. It's killing us. It's killing our families. It's harming our communities in ways that other groups may not be seeing. I'm sorry, I had to put it out there. How do we tackle or address this as a crisis, as an epidemic crisis that is actually maybe a public health issue
Yes.
because of the ways in which it is harming Black women, Black queer people, Black children. What do we do about this? Like, can we? I mean, and I'm not telling you to solve this today, Doc, because I know you
No, I
can't.
couldn't possibly.
But in kind of your thoughts, loose thoughts,
Yeah. I think.
like, what do we do? How do we start this conversation? How do we start this work?
I think, well, I think so much of what I've already discussed, but like, there already needs to be more treatment available. That I think when I talk with friends and family of someone with those issues, be it relationship partners or whatever, I think recognizing that there is always going to be a limit to what you can provide to someone if you are not yourself a professional, and that you need to maintain those boundaries and self-protection. And so while, I've taken on the task of trying to save my community one mind at a time, everybody ain't built for that life. And while I think as a community, we can have an agenda around mental health, mental wellness, it is not everyone's individual responsibility to bear the weight of someone who is choosing or not choosing by virtue of whatever, wherever they are mentally, to be pathological. So, I think as a community, we can have this as an agenda, but mental health, it often, when I can't tell you how many rooms I've been in where I'm there because they thought mental health should be important, and then it falls off the agenda so fast because as a community, we have so many problems. But I think we need to keep it in mind when we talk about health, when we talk about wellness, mental health needs to be a priority, but that everybody can't carry that either. That we need to do more to train people, to bring people in, to provide more resources and support, but recognize that people have limits in what they can do in their relationships, in their environment, in their community.
But in a patriarchal society, women have been charged with healing men. Women have been charged with being the nurse, the therapist, the doctor, the midwife, the wife, the bangmaid, the housekeeper, the cook, the chef, the mother, all these things. And so there are so many women who will believe that is their responsibility. And I know this is heteronormative, and I apologize, but I'm talking, specific about a specific issue. It's like, because I know that I've experienced, as smart as I am, as into this as I am, that feeling of, especially as a Black woman, like, we're in this together racially. I get it, Black man. I know that you're dealing with this because I deal with it too. We both leave the house. We both go to work. We both got to deal with microaggressions. Both got to deal with things. Police may stop you to frisk you. They may stop me to frisk me. Like, we are dealing with these things together. And then we come back home and you taking it out on me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to support you, and I also need you to support me. But there's like a disconnect there where some brothers believe that their experiences are worse, their pain is more, or whatever. But I've also felt that, women are more likely to seek help. As you said, women are more likely to have the group chats that they can vent to. They're more likely to seek out the therapy and stuff like that. So they are developing these methods and these coping mechanisms.
Developing the supports, yes.
And women will more likely take their medications, right? There's a lot of pride behind, well, I don't need no medication to get
women tend to be more medically adherent to treatment for a variety of reasons. Yes.
Yes. So what do we do about that? Like, Doc, like, it's like,
once again, can't solve this at one time. No. But I think, once again, understanding limitations, that you can be in relationship with someone, you can be connected to someone, but you can't be everything to any one person.
Yeah.
So how do you find ways to erect boundaries that protect yourself? Because, I have done this work with people who are in relationships with partners who've tried desperately to get them into therapy, to get them to take their medications, do what they need to do, and they don't. And it is disruptive. And how do you maintain connection and intimacy with someone who might be toxic to you? And so while there could be a sense of community burden, and I don't want to use the word burden, responsibility to treatment, to health, to wellness, to connection, there is the meta, and then there's the individual, right? So there's systemic, and then there's the individual. And as an individual, you have to recognize, where's the line between you and the needs of your community? Where's the line between you and the needs of, say, your partner or your brother or your father or whoever they are? And how do you find a way to, if you need to, maintain that connection while still setting a boundary around the type of care they need?
Yeah. I think the boundary setting thing comes up a lot because you'll see, like, if we look at social media, you'll see brothers saying, things like, you tell us to be vulnerable, but when we are, this is how you treat us. Okay. All right. I can understand that. I can understand,
Oh no, it happens.
how that can make you feel. Like you try to say something, somebody smacks your shit down. Oh, excuse me. Smacks it down, makes you feel like whatever. But then there's also the times where they say, well, I don't say nothing because nobody's going to listen. Well, you don't know anybody's going to listen because you don't say anything, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have somebody saying, I'm listening. I want you to talk to me. And he still won't. And so the person is, you know what? I'm a bad guy. I can't help you. Well, look, you've abandoned me. You walked away. I know that you have your group as consistent to allow people to come and to build up, but a lot of people don't necessarily have it in them to just be like, okay, I'm going to sit here and wait for 20 minutes. If you're going to talk to me, okay, you don't want to talk, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll try again.
And like what I do as a clinician, what people are capable of, and that we need more systems to provide care, but that you can't hold yourself accountable as the individual to do all that heavy lifting. There have to be,
because a lot of folks feel like they can do that, and it's just like, that is not your job.
No,
mama, sister, daddy, cousin, that's not your job to do that. You're not necessarily trained. You don't have the skills.
Right. I think it's because, once again, mental health is undervalued in our society. It's like, what I often tell men, particularly when they think, well, I just talk to my friends or I call my pastor or whatever. It's like, you don't say that when you're having car trouble. You don't say that when you're having heart trouble, right? Like you need a professional sometimes. And so just like you can't crack a person's chest open and clear their arteries for them, you can't hold yourself to someone who's dealing with, say, the positive symptoms of schizophrenia or the mania and think you are responsible to treat them or to help them in that moment, that you are going to have to direct them to help and maybe step away if you need to protect yourself.
All right, I'm gonna throw one final question at you, and I'm gonna use this for promotion. So
I will do my best.
Okay,
get it right the first time.
There's been this wave, this new thing of brothers saying, and I only see brothers saying, I only see black men saying, I want a woman to be my peace. What are they really saying? What's behind that? When a brother's out here, I just want a woman to be my peace. Not offering to be her peace, but just saying, I need my peace.
I think
what are they saying, Doc? What's behind that?
I think underneath it is a need to have a space to be vulnerable with another human being, with once again, structurally, who's the only human being we can be vulnerable with, which are often romantic partners. And for that person to not add stress or distress to their life, and to allow them space to feel comforted and nurtured in all the ways that ideally a heteronormative relationship can provide. But once again, they put so much of that burden on romantic partnerships when sometimes they need to spread it around to friendships, to mentorships, to other types of connections. So when they're asking for that from romantic relationships, they're often asking, once again, in this sort of Western heteronormative way, can you provide me with all the emotional nurturance that I need? And sometimes without having done the work to even know how to accept that, to even know what that need truly is underneath. And so how can that person be that for you when you don't even know? You might not know. I can't say that everybody don't know. There are a lot of people who might not know what peace even feels like. So
and because a lot of times women receive that as like, well, you just want me to shut up and be submissive, not have an opinion, just kind of sit there and rub your feet and not oppose you on anything, not challenge you, not question anything. And that's how a lot of women receive that. And they're just like, well, no, I want to be a whole person. I want to be able to talk to you. If you're wrong, I want to be able to challenge that. But then, I don't know. Just think that some sisters, there is a disconnect there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think once again, particularly in the Black community, there is often this sort of, we're both growing up in the struggle. I think if we look back historically before the internet got involved, there were a lot more of us who knew we had to band together to survive, and that has been disrupted, particularly as we develop these sort of, once again, we're being fed so much imagery and so much mythology that is not our own. But that I think in that is You know, the idea of, say, your grandfather went to work at the steel mill. He was there all day. He came home to a cooked meal. And I know that's like patriarchy and heteronormative, but like the idea that there was someone who cared for him, who nurtured him, and that was the wife who was long suffering and supportive. And he took care of her needs and she took care of him emotionally. And that worked because that was the society that was built then. Now, also, if we go back historically, Black men were not so hetero and patriarchal. We were historically the type of men who did a lot of help in parenting, and historically,
women were centered in our communities. We were the most important figures in our communities. Men were the support systems.
Yes. And
yes,
so
we brought life. And so the people who bring life are the people who were heralded as the most important people.
Right. Things have changed. Definitely.
Yeah, well, because of European patriarchy, where having a child just makes you a disposable incubator and you're a liability to the male's progress.
And so a lot of the, particularly like when we talk about like the worst among us who have these ideals around, you know, I should have access to more women, and women should just shut up and listen and make me a sandwich. It's, once again, they're just really drinking the Kool-Aid of patriarchy, in part because of being so disenfranchised from what the idea of maleness is. It's like, well, this sounds delightful. It would be great to be the master and commander of a family, of the nuclear family alone.
Have any of that power?
Yes, it'd be great to have that power. It'd be nice to have power. Who doesn't want power?
Yeah.
But also toxic and maladaptive, and not good for long-term coupling.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. We are almost at 90 minutes. My goodness. But this is a really important and informative class. And like I said, we did open it up to the public. We are hoping that, you know, more people come and watch this and can learn some things. So I'm going to send you to the back. Everybody, put a 1 in the chat if you really appreciated Dr. Hall coming in. Because, you know, this is not political theater, though. So we're going to... For those who don't know, we also do a podcast. You know, we do some podcasting together, political theater, and I'm always teasing and asking people to get rid of him. So anyway, thank you again, Dr. Hall. This was a really great class and session. Hopefully, for years to come, people can still come back to this and watch and learn a lot about Black men and mental health, and really kind of addressing a lot of these issues from an Afrocentric perspective. This is our second to last class. We have one more, and that is going to be tomorrow night. And it's going to wrap us all up with a conversation about Ubuntu. In the meantime, we are still accepting donations. This is how we are able to support our instructors, support the running of the program, the overhead costs, all of those kinds of things. You can go to sankofasummerschool.com/donate. If you were coming here and you had not registered for the class, this is totally grassroots. We have no corporate sponsorship. We are very concerned about the administration and how they're even handling nonprofit stuff. So this is totally grassroots. This is totally a community supported and funded endeavor. And we are 5 years running. So you can send Cash App or Venmo to Fem Jones, or you can go directly to sankofasummerschool.com/donate. You can donate right on the site, take Apple Pay, PayPal, all the good stuff. And those donations really go to help support us. And then we can pay people like Dr. Hall for contributing their time and their expertise to come in and drop some knowledge and help us get free, right? We just had Dr. Anderson said freedom is a living thing. And I like to think that it lives with Sankofa Summer School. So if you're watching this and you want to support, we really appreciate that. And so, like I said, we will be back tomorrow. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a really great conversation, and we will see you soon. Take care.